Hi yogis, this video is all about yoga blocks. Now I'm a huge fan of using props both in the studio and in my own practice, and blocks are perhaps the most commonly used prop across the different yoga class styles. Whether you're new to yoga or have been practicing for a long time, blocks can be a great addition to your physical asana yoga practice. And so this video will help you to decide which blocks to pick up when you go to a studio that has multiple materials or sizes to choose from. And perhaps more importantly, if you're looking to buy some blocks for your home practice, I'll share some tips on which size and material to get you, depending on whether you're doing vinyasa flow or chair yoga, yin or restorative, and in which to pick if you do all of those practices. We'll also take into account budget, how many you'll need, and longevity as well. And this video might also help you if you're a new yoga teacher looking to get some props for your teaching space. So let's get to it. To start, let's have a quick look at the purpose of using your blocks. As you can establish how you'll be using it most often, it might have an effect on the type that you pick. So across most styles of yoga, blocks are used to create stability. They're used for support or they're used to bridge a gap. They can be used quite creatively as well, added to your practice for balance, exploration, muscle activation, and inquiry practices. So when I talk about stability and support and bridging, an example of that is using a block either side of a front leg in a low lunge so that you can remain upright while reducing the chance of wobbling or falling to the side. You can use blocks to bridge a gap in a standing forward fold when you can't comfortably reach the floor, your hamstrings are tight, or similarly under the lowest hand in a triangle pose, again, to bridge the gap between you and the floor so that you can maintain a safe depth and alignment. In seated and reclining poses, you can use a block to support you, for example, under the sacrum in a supported bridge pose, so that you can hold the pose and relax into it or lift the feet up to the ceiling. And this is just a few of many ways that they're useful. So I also mentioned using them creatively in your practice to create a sense of curiosity. So this might be something that you do after having practiced for a while. You can use it as curiosity, exploration, and inquiry. An example of that is squeezing a block between your legs in a boat pose, or holding the block overhead between the hands in a lunge to add a little bit of extra engagement or weight. Some yogis familiar with the practice might also choose to increase the challenge of a balance by standing on a block, like in a tree pose or vrikshasana, or to use them as a weight to activate muscles in active stretches. And this again is just a few of the many ways they can be added. And like I said, I think blocks offer the most options when it comes to being used, both when you're first starting a yoga practice and then also for yogis who have been practicing for many, many years. It just changes how you use them. So let's get to the blocks themselves. Excuse me. There are different shapes and sizes and materials available on the market these days. And I'm going to stick at looking at the rectangular or the brick-shaped blocks because there are some now that have cutouts for your hands and corners cut off in different shapes. But in my experience, those are more novel, and usually the different shapes actually end up limiting their usability rather than making them better in some way. So I'm not saying those are necessarily bad, and they might look cool or really cover a specific need, but I'd recommend starting with a simple block-shaped one and adding the fun ones to your collection at a later date if they appeal to you. So we will look at the size and then the materials. For the most part, there are two sizes of blocks available. There are 3-inch blocks and 4-inch blocks. I personally prefer 4-inch blocks if this is your first set, and that's because of a few reasons. Firstly, the smaller size not only affects the height of a block, this way, but also the width of a block. So as you can see, I've got a 3-inch and a 4-inch block. You can see the different heights here if you lie them flat. So this 3-inch one, 4-inch one. But this 3-inch block also has a narrower profile widthwise. Okay, so this 3-inch block is 4.5 inches wide, whereas the 4-inch block is 6 inches wide. Now both of the blocks are about the same 9-inch length, So they're about the same height. They're the 3 inches about half an inch shorter. So they give you pretty much the same amount of reach if you put them on their ends. The reason that I like the bigger block is that when you use the block on its end for stability, so this way up, when you use it on the end for stability, the smaller surface area of the block makes it a little bit more wobbly. So the 3-inch block with its smaller surface end area does make it more inclined to wobble. So it makes a difference when you use them on their ends. But also if you lie them flat, the surface area is different. So if you wanted to use the blocks under your hands in downward facing dog, you got your fingers spread out, or in a plank. So you'd only really want to do that on its lowest height. And you can see that I can't really spread my fingers out on this 3-inch block. I run out of room. They'd be squeezed together for my hand to be on there. Whereas on a 4-inch block, my fingers can spread a little bit, similar to how my hand will be on the floor. So if you're using the block to elevate you in any way, whether you're doing a tree pose standing on it or putting it under the front foot in a high lunge or even sitting, the larger surface area is definitely preferable. If you're bridging the gap like under your lifted thigh in pigeon or under the thighs in Baddha Konasana, cobbler's pose, both will do the same job, but I personally like the extra height of a 4-inch block. And if you're using the block because you're on the tighter side, because you're on the stiffer side of things, or because you want to lift a little higher, the 4-inch block is actually going to be more appropriate. So for this reason, I think that across the board in Vinyasa Flow, chair yoga, gentle yoga, restorative, and yin, the 4-inch block will serve you better. And I haven't yet found something that I want to do with a 3-inch block that I can't do with a 4-inch block, but I have the other way around. So having established, hopefully, which size you want to pick, the 4-inch one over the 3-inch one, the next choice to make is material. And this can be a bit more pose or yoga style dependent. You can get wooden blocks, cork blocks, and foam blocks. And I don't have my wooden blocks here to show you today, but I'm going to skip those as I find the cork and the foam most useful. The wooden ones are a lot like the cork in density, and ones I have are more like foam in weight. So it's a bit of a weird combination, but mainly I'm skipping over them because they're a bit more slippery and a bit more awkward. There's really they're not a winner in any area. So when it comes to choosing between cork and foam blocks, I prefer cork blocks for almost all practices. The reason for this is that they are dense and solid and a little heavier. So they're more stable and supportive. They're harder to knock over, they're harder to wobble, and I'll often see people using the foam blocks wobble to the side under their hands. They're just really easy to fumble and to knock over in a class when you're getting into a pose as well. There is an exception to this preference, and that's if you only do yin and restorative yoga. You might actually prefer the foam block. The edges are a little bit softer and squishier, so when you rest your thighs on them or your head on them or your face on them, you just feel a bit more comfortable than the hard cork ones. I mentioned earlier using the blocks in your practice to add an element of challenge or inquiry. And in this instance, if you're using your blocks like a weight or to squeeze between your hands or the legs, the cork is a little heavier and firmer. The foam is a little lighter, but more comfortable to squeeze. So the cork block is more challenging to hold out. It will build more strength because of its weight, but it is still possible to do all of those things with the foam block. If you do think you'll use your blocks to stand on, the foam block, while they're not super squishy, are just soft enough to make it more difficult and not in a good way. Their lighter weight makes them more prone to flipping, even on their lowest height, which you definitely don't want when you're standing on them. So if you're thinking of adding them in ways like elevating the front foot in a lunge, I definitely recommend going with these firmer cork blocks for that. There's one other time when the weight might be a deciding factor, and that's if you're a mobile yoga teacher carrying multiple sets around with you. The weight of the cork blocks adds up super quickly, so you might want to consider that too, and foam ones might be a better choice based on that alone. When it comes to longevity and how long your blocks will last, my experience, the studio and at home, foam blocks dent and mark more. I don't know if I have any marks on this one at the moment, but they dent and mark more easily. So if you have long nails or hold on tight, you can definitely leave some permanent marks in these. Cats and puppies can also do some pretty good damage to these as well. Cork blocks are a bit more hard wearing. I'm still using the first set I bought, whereas I've replaced the foam ones a couple of times now. So if you're watching this, you might be thinking that you could just buy one block and give it a little go and see if it works for you. And that buying just one block will be easier to store, to travel with, to take to your classes and on trips. But something I think is very, very important is getting 2 matching blocks. I highly recommend getting 2 for whichever type of yoga you're going to be doing. If you're adding support in restorative poses, there are some poses where you'll just use one block, but in the symmetrical poses, you'll want to be able to create even support under both of your legs or both of your arms. In other classes, if you're using blocks under your hands in a fold or a pyramid, you'll again benefit from even support, one under each hand, rather than reaching unevenly for one single point. So let's sum it up and get you ready to pick your blocks. Narrowing this down, I hope is going to be super simple for you now. So let's break it down a little bit. We established already, ideally when buying blocks, we're looking to get 2 4-inch blocks. So you might find that your budget picks the type for you. If you're on a bit of a tighter budget, foam blocks will be the most affordable to get you going. And even though we've talked lots about the benefit of the cork ones, 2 4-inch foam blocks is going to be better than a single cork one. Just keep your eyes open if you're looking for a deal, as you'll often find what seems like a great price on a block, but more often than not, the cheaper blocks are the 3-inch ones, but the size is like hidden in the specs somewhere. So keep your eyes open for that. If you only practice restorative and or yin yoga, you'll be best picking up 2 foam blocks. So that's 2 4-inch foam blocks for restorative and yin yogis. If you practice or would like to practice a mixture of classes, everything from vinyasa to gentle or chair yoga, and yin and restorative, and leave your options open, and your budget allows for it, you'll want to pick up a couple of 4-inch cork blocks. So I hope that has helped you to understand which yoga blocks are best for you right now and given you the confidence to pick them in a yoga studio or to buy your own for your home practice. If you found this useful, have questions about blocks or other yoga props, or have questions about yoga poses, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me, Yogi. Namaste.